Hello and welcome all of. Let's start a panel discussion on digital leaders rewriting the story of organizational transformation. We have with us our moderator, Mr. Vinod Kumar, Managing Director, Strategy and Consulting, Chemicals and Natural Resources, Accenture India. Our panelists, Mr. Sumeet Chandna, Head of Digital Transformation and Marketing Excellence, Cipla India, Mr. Ashutosh Mittal, Senior Director, Biocon Biologics, Mr. Aneesh Chaudhry, CDO, HUL and VP Technology, Analytics and Business Services, South Asia, Unilever. Welcome all of you. Dear delegates, please keep asking your questions in the chat box. The panel may address a few in the end. Over to you, Mr. Kumar.
Thank you. Thanks for that introduction. And good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this summit on digital leaders rewriting the story of organizational transformation. I think we are in a very, very difficult time. So I would start on a somber note, wishing all of you, your families, your extended communities, all the best. And everybody remaining safe is the wish that we all have. On that somber note, I just also wanted to welcome my co-panelists, the eminent panelists, Anish Chaudhry, who is the CDO of HUL, Ashutosh Mittal, who is the Global Quality and Digital Transformation Lead, and Sumit, who is the Head of Digital Transformation at Cipla. A quick introduction about myself. My name is Vinod Kumar. I lead the Chemicals and Natural Resources Industry Group for Accenture in India. Been in Accenture for 16 years now and over 2 decades of experience across India and Europe. Been very fortunate to be part in actually helping companies rewrite the story of digital and organizational transformation in the era of digital. And as per us, we are in a post-digital era. So, having been through that journey, I just wanted to share with you and start with a presentation on, what does it take to be a leader? This is a practitioner lens that I have taken. And, the examples that you see here are not something which is in the realm of theory yet, because it's happening as we speak. It is driven by a lot of change, and I don't want to overdrive the change that has been given or driven by the pandemic. But the fact remains that the unprecedented changes have created the imperatives for companies to go for these changes. Now, before we go into this, I'll just wanted to present a simple framework, which kind of brings everybody on the same plane in terms of digital transformation means a lot of things to a lot of people. But if you look at a simple framework, it has 2 dimensions, internal focus and external focus. You can digitalize all your operations and create the efficiencies in your organization, and very, very important in terms of if you look at the right axis of this entire thing. Or you can just go in one direction, trying to create just a front end for, let's say, your customer experiences. But what we have really seen is that if we combine the power of digital in both internal and external focus, you get a complete transformation. You change the business models that you've been operating in. You create new possibilities which help you become more efficient in your business, but also give you the capacity and the capability to disrupt. The discussions today are very clearly between the disrupted and the disruptors. And our experience has been that incumbents can also become disruptors by questioning their business model, using digital as a possibility to move from, let's say, partial digitalization to a complete business-led digitalization. What I also wanted to emphasize here is that never to lose sight on the value opportunities, because at the end of the day, you can either have a be digital kind of mindset, which says that there are a lot of possibilities of going and doing digital experimentation. But will those digital interventions create value, or will they remain in the realm of, let's say, nice new tools, which can be used for creating point differences, but does not change much as far as the overall organization is concerned? When we talk about overall organization, it's about the value, but at the same time, the value can be created through proper execution. So here, our study shows that the strategy and execution needs to go hand in hand. And for execution to go completely seamlessly with the overall transformation agenda, you need to have the right, what we call as the right digital DNA. Now, I just don't want to flash a lot of new jargons or terms here. The intention is to say that it's also about the basics. Digital gives you capabilities. Digital gives you a lot of opportunities to transform. But the transformation will happen and be sustainable if you create the leadership DNA within the organization, the new age digital leadership, which orchestrates new ways of working. We cannot have the old mindset and still think that organizations will transform just because you've got new technology capabilities. You need digital talents. You cannot just rely on, let's say, the outside world to transform your internal organization. So how do you create, for example, digital fluency, analytics fluency inside the organization, which needs new competencies and methods to be embedded within your organization? How do you create the organization and culture to actually make those changes? And no, this sounds very soft in terms of the cultural change, but it's very, very important. It's actually the good old saying that, culture eats strategy for breakfast. That was said long decades back by somebody, but is as relevant today as it was ever before. Um, and most importantly, in digital, when it's creating new ways of, let's say, work, you need to question, how do you act into new ways of thinking, right? And rather than just think about new ways of acting, which means that you think that you will create a lot of possibilities, but you're not executing. That's where the cultural change happens, by actually giving people see the value of digital in their day-to-day work and how it makes life different for them. And leadership is all important. Just 2 minutes touch on this. For example, if you see on the left side, you have got the traditional leadership behaviors in terms of individual performances, control being the key thing, functional expertise, which is limited to one functional silos, uh, to a culture where you create that innovation and open-mindedness, customer centricity, because it's all about the customer experience, agile ways of working, not just siloed in one department, and very importantly, basic technology understanding. Because earlier we used to think of technology as something that should reside in a specialized functional or area, like a technology department or a digital department now created. But now we are talking about technology questions, which means that technology being relevant for the entire organization, and everybody having the basic understanding of the technology. So, this is the overall framework in terms of how you create the right kind of journey map, how do you execute properly, and how do you create the softer aspects of change inside the organization to rewrite the story of digital transformation. I just wanted to take a minute to explain, this is one of the leading steel companies in its own market, and how they undertook this journey, a very large player in this own industry, leader already in their industry, and still thinking about transformation, uh, looking at digital as a tool for all their core processes, as we call it, from minds to market, their entire transformation, including the capital projects that they undertook. And this was big deal for them, because a single day delay in execution of their project means a $5 million of top line per day, and a $1 million loss of bottom line per day that could happen. And they applied digital in those areas, which gave them tremendous amount of benefit. But these are the results that you see. How they started this journey was way back in FY16, when the world was not talking about digital a lot, but they started talking about digital at that particular point in time. Created the foundation by creating those at those and in those days, fail safe kind of, if you fail, fail fast, fail cheap, fail safe, and learn through those experimentation. But having created those experimentation, they created a very strong foundation team through digital immersion programs to creation of the analytics center of excellence. And then that foundation helped them accelerate. And today, as we speak, I think they have scaled up this to reap huge amount of benefit. And on the note that I started, this company did all this pre-pandemic. We all were faced with this unprecedented challenge in these times. This company was also faced with this situation, but they navigated it very well. And one of the contributors of that was that they had created the foundation much ahead of the curve. So, ladies and gentlemen, on that note, where we talked about the overall framework, the important ingredients, to an example of a company which has actually practiced this and led this journey. I would pause here and welcome you and lead you into this panel discussion. So thank you very much. I will just stop sharing the presentation for now and get into the panel discussion. Good. So, Anish, I would start with you. And, we all have different experiences. We have the, advantage of having seen it in our different contexts. And HUL is obviously, we all respect it as a leader in its industry, in a business which matters to all of us, right? So what do you think are some of the key factors for a successful digital transformation, reflecting on the journey that you would have taken earlier?
Sure, Vinod. So thank you for having me here. And just for the audience, I'm from Hindustan Unilever. So we are a soap, soup, shampoo company, and we've been around for a long while. And I think for us, and if I reflect back on our journey on digital transformation, but if I broaden it to transformation with tech, has been around for quite some time. And to answer your direct question, the imperative for us is on three things, how we measure success. I think first and foremost, it has to show up in our results. Now, be the results is in terms of consumers being happier, customers being happier, result in terms of growth or our cost control, or results be even in the engagement score that our employees give on whether how do they enjoy working in the business. So for us, we've moved away from many years back from input driven to outcome driven. And as we call, what are the outcome measures? So those are the three areas how we measure ourselves. But of course, when we do the improvement, we also have to compare and contrast with what's happening in our industry and beyond. For example, all of us are consumers, and we are used to having a particular experience when we go online or in shop. And then once that experience is set, everyone, irrespective of the industry, that's the benchmark you have to meet. So whether you're getting a great experience of buying an Apple phone or a Xiaomi phone or a Samsung phone, you would want obviously the same experience when you're buying soup and soap as well. So it's a lot of an ongoing exercise of continuing benchmarking on what's the consumer need and the benchmark they are setting of the service they want. And then, of course, in the first instance, meet it, but then also exceed. So I think that's kind of one theme. The other theme, of course, is this is really not only about doing our current business better. It is also about creating, as you were outlining in the introductory slides, of new business models as well. And I'm sure at some point in the call today, we will talk about them. But that's how we think about this area.
No, great. I think this is very, very, inspirational for all of us. The way, if I reflect on some of the journeys that leaders in their industry have taken, the internal, these are common themes also cutting across, and it has varied in terms of how people have also executed that and thought about the future in terms of what lies next, having achieved what you have already achieved. So no, that's great. And Sumit, coming to you, and this is you are in an industry which is so very critical right now, just like consumer we talked about. Today in these times, we cannot ever overemphasize the importance of saving lives and saving, and Cipla has been at the forefront of all these initiatives. And of course, you lead the digital transformation in Cipla, which is so critical to even in the current times. What are your own reflections on what are the things, especially with respect to, if we may touch upon the current situation as well, how you have leveraged digital in terms of those transformation journeys?
Sure. Vinod, thanks first of all for having me, and a good afternoon to everyone who's on this audience. So if I look back, this pandemic has, among so many other things, actually put the entire healthcare industry in the forefront and to say the least, a creaking healthcare industry which had its own set of weaknesses for quite long. They got exposed in this period, and in that sense, I think the whole industry is turned upside down. What we are going through, is nothing short of a metamorphosis at an individual level. Forget organizations, but I think as a country also, it's the first of its kind. Um, so in a sense, I think the journey for any consumer in India, uh, is also undergoing a big change. We have been a very, very illness-oriented healthcare industry, and the journey towards wellness is a very long one. And it's, in a way, thanks to this pandemic, that a lot of industries associated with patient care have woken up. Um, so not only is the patient, at the center of the attention. In the past, it was a doctor, and it's admitted that the transition of focusing on a doctor to focusing on a patient and all the needs, that transition itself is a journey. And the next journey, which I think Anish is talking about, is to treat the patient as a consumer, because it's not that you tap into the consumer when he becomes a patient. It is how do you ensure that you're preventing those illnesses upfront, and that's the journey that this industry is transitioning. But as an organization, Vinod, since you asked, Cipla has been at the forefront of caring for life. That's our mission. But these times have pulled us into very different journeys that we are going through. The first of it, which is the cultural journey that we are going through, where we are rediscovering our purpose, rediscovering why the organization exists, and for every individual to pick up a area of passion which would define their goals for the next few years. So that's a very, very different journey, which is a shift from what the initial generation of Cipla started the organization from. So it's almost resetting, in the new ways of working. And this journey is very different from the other journey, which is on the digital side, wherein the question is about what is the use case of bringing a tool, what purpose is it serving, how soon can we bring a certain service to a patient or to a doctor, and of course, how do we sustain it in terms of infrastructure building. So those are two different parallel journeys, which is external and internal, as you mentioned, and that's something which we are also traveling right now. Yeah.
No, that's very heartening to note. Sumit, this is and as consumer of services in these times, I think if the thought process that you put together, and I see a common link between what Aneesh said in terms of internal focus to external focus, right? From you said from doctors to patients to doctors to consumer of your services. I think that's a big transition actually, and the possibilities that it creates in terms of the mindset that you talked about, which we also saw in some of the other companies. But what do you think reimagining your business, that are you a company which addresses illness, or you're focused on the wellness and well-being of humanity at large, and enabling that is a journey. You also talked about some of the internal things, and that's very important to sustain the change while you're doing. And there were questions from the audience which is coming in terms of internal focus or external focus. But as we saw, at least in these two examples and the examples that I also shared, it's a combination that goes through, which is about the internal. You cannot take your eyes off one. You can go on one extreme and still lose focus on efficiency, and trying to do a lot, you are also not being responsible in terms of how much value you can create for the business, which will help you serve the consumer, the customers, the end industries better. So it's a great example of how these two things go hand in hand. Now I will come to Ashutosh, from your perspective. Since you also lead the quality aspects, and from, if you take the internal lens for a moment and say that in your organization, what are the key challenges and opportunities you have seen in your company, as far as let's say the internal changes are concerned, which will enable those external changes that we discussed so far.
No, thanks, Vinod, for giving me this opportunity, and good afternoon, everyone. So, as Vinod rightly said, see, Biocon Biologics is mainly a technology company, and when we talk about technology, this technology is actually for saving patients' life and all. Now, if you really save something which can come 5 years back and which is still not in market, it's actually having a direct impact on the patients. So actually, what we really have to do is, instead of going external journey, we started with our internal journey. And pharma and especially biotech is a very regulated industry. Everything is governed by a lot of regulators and all. And we started this journey almost not very far away, means like almost like two years back. And what we find is very, very important that how we change our way of working first. See, putting technology will not solve everything. First, you have to put our own innovative way of working, and then you can add any technology on top of that. And this thought process really worked with us. And what we have done is we try to understand why we are not able to make things faster, why things are not going to the world in the right time. And that's how we started this journey. And we mainly worked on the things which is actually changing the way we are working internally. And it's a very good thing. Like, I basically into quality, and quality is the main user of these technology within a company. So we do a little change in the approach. Instead of bringing somebody from IT and start doing this journey, we started thinking, let's do users take this ownership. And because it actually solves lot of things on adoption also. If user himself bring a technology and an innovation, I think your half battle is already done, because you will be then doing things much faster. And we have seen those results in last 2 years. Things which generally takes like 3 4 years, 5 years, we are able to do those things in a year. And that's how we bring a lot of focus on how we can make things faster, efficient, and how we can reduce a lot of team efforts on things which is not so worthy. So that's how we have worked. What do you know?
No, no, excellent. I think so. So that's very foundational, and that's very, very critical. As you said, that we can have the ambition, but create the new ways of working and enabling the people to do that. I think I'll turn my attention to Sumit once again on that question that came in terms of, and we talked about the internal focus and external focus. Just would you want to give some nuances around if someone needs a direction and guidance on where should we start? If there's internal focus, there's external, there's so many things to be done. So what's
So,
your
Vinod, I do want to mention here, I think there is a question on the internal focus versus external.
yeah.
See, I think inherently most companies are internally focused.
Mm.
They have been successful because they were solving a problem of the industry. However, to bring efficiency at scale, all successful organizations uh, tend to build efficiencies internally are quite, to be of a certain scale. Yeah. Having said that, in the new ways that are emerging, uh, there is a need to look at your own value chain from the eyes of the customer and start identifying the pain areas of the customer, which is easier said than done. In our own organization, I can give you examples wherein we do have a tendency to sometimes downplay the pain areas of an existing process that a customer goes through, and we tend to overestimate the new experience that we want to give to our customers without fixing the old. So sometimes it becomes fashionist to go down a route of providing a novel a novel experience which looks externally savvy, but it does not solve for the basics in the value chain. On the other hand, with so many IT and tech tools available, again it becomes fashionist to deploy blockchain. For example, even when the use case is not strong enough. So swinging on either side, purely external or purely internal, both have its own pitfalls, of course. And I would say that every company's journey is very unique, even within the same industry. I think the problems that you're trying to solve for within biologics, within chemical molecules, again, it's very different. And based on your market share, based on where you want to go 2 to 3 years down the line, the statements within digital, the use cases within digital are so specific that it's difficult to just apply them from company A to company B. Uh, and so, in many ways, the digital journey is not, is a very tiresome, I would say, and a very repetitive one, because you have to try out a lot of things and get the right answer, which is very unique fit for that organization. So there is no sweet spot lying out there which you'll just discover. It is a journey which you have to travel with a lot of iterations in the process.
No, no, great. And I think that word that you used in terms of it should not become fashionist in terms of a new shiny tool in people's hand. Just you want to do it for the sake of it, but to create an outcome. and which is not a point outcome. And hence, maybe I think it's also a question of putting that internal and external perspective on the background and thinking of, an end-to-end kind of solution which creates value. And I think the prioritization, because an organization may have limited, let's say, bandwidth, and the key thing is how do you allocate the resources, the attention, the focus on the vital few as well, and then create the experimentation which are done in a responsible manner, but also with a sight, as you said, on the future in terms of an end-to-end experience and not just a wrapper, if I may call it, if I borrow your term. And that's the key thing, right? So, Anish, your reflections, because you have always been on the forefront of this change ahead of the curve as well. So, I think how did you take care of that in the initial days? If you do a bit of reflection and also a commentary on the current situation and a fall forward kind of view, that would be helpful.
Absolutely. And I think it's a very interesting topic, and we've also learned over the years. And if I look back 10 years back, I think our focus started very much from an internal operational efficiency perspective. And I think it comes from the fact that it's a low hanging fruit. It's easy to identify an opportunity and apply technology to create value. And I think, not surprisingly, we started there. And then also it gives a little bit of a feedback to the organization. This is worth investing more. Then you invest more. And I think that's where it is. And I just see a message that my video is not visible.
Now it is.
I hope it's okay.
Yes, now it is. Yeah.
So, and I think it's really about starting with a low-hanging fruit in our journey, proving that it works, and then that creates more excitement, you invest more. But if I reflect on how things have moved for us, the learning we've had over the last 3 years is really two big things. See, one, the word digital transformation is a bit of a misnomer. See, end of the day, it's a business transformation. Yeah, it just happens to be with a suite of technologies, which we are calling differently, but genuinely, it's a business transformation. And if in your industry, the transformation value comes more from external, how you engage with consumers and customers, please focus there. If you believe the transformation can come from create most value by changing how you operate internally, please focus there. But it is really about business transformation and not about digital. Second, I think the other thing which is different now more recently is that the changes happen not only in technologies which are enterprise grade. See, a lot of technology in the past were impacting enterprises, big companies. Now the digital intervention is each and every consumer has also got empowered. And I think that's also the big change which is happening, that it's not only the companies which have the tech to leverage, the consumers have changed also with internet, smartphones and the like. And it's that confluence which is creating new opportunities, which are tend to be more external oriented. But absolutely, it's a little bit of a mix. You need to decide for your business where is the most value by bringing these technologies to play.
No, that's very well articulated. And the point that business, it's actually about, and we call it by whatever name, but you nailed it in terms of we looked at value, and we say that it's also about the business transformation, different ways of working, different ways of serving customers, different ways of operating. And I think that's where I think the convergence of this panel discussion is also towards how do you create integrated sets of new experiences, new possibilities, new efficiency sources, but don't lose focus on the business value at the end of the day, because that becomes the oxygen for everything that you do going forward as well.
And Vinod, if I just
yeah,
make
please.
it real with one very small example. See, 6-7 years back, when I wanted to improve the experience of my customer, which is a Kirana shop on the corner where all we purchase our goods, at the end of the day, if the customer was not digitally savvy, didn't have a smartphone, didn't have internet, anything I could do was only to the extent of my delivery to his store or her store. Beyond that, I could not do anything because he or she was not ready. I think now what's changed last 3 years is they are more than ready and are willing to change. And therefore, naturally, our focus has also moved more external. So it's a little bit of our ecosystem also, which we play in when we make our choices, whether internal or external.
No, absolutely, and that's very critical, and it's also very industry dependent in terms of maturity of in given industry, but the themes are common in terms of selecting an end-to-end play, selecting, putting customer or the end user at the center of this entire thing, and looking at the possibilities not just from your own organization, but what is the enablement available. And the example that you gave is it was the holy grail of your industry, as I understand it. I mean, you finally cracked it in terms of reaching the last leg and the most important leg of that value chain. So and we see this, even if in other industries somebody asked about the question on, let's say, mine to market kind of thing in terms of in a natural resources company, how does that change? We have seen that happen as well. Today, all through the pandemic, if we just reflect on, our lights were up all the time. That's also because somebody in the coal mines was working all through. And believe me, with a much lower number of people on the site and much less resources on the site, that enablement happened. Finally, it changed the end consumer experiences as well in that respect. So if you look at two different industry and cut a common thread, this resonates as a common theme across. So Anish, thanks for bringing that out, and we talked about these changes. If I come to you, Ashutosh, in terms of the example that you talked about, in terms of creating the basics and getting the foundation right, how do you create a culture for also a sustainable kind of change? Because we all talked about things which we have done, a great set of initiatives which were done in a proactive manner, impacted by, let's say, external things where different levels of readiness in the organization, different organizations created an imperative for change and different responses came. And then things lie beyond us as well. So how do you now create that foundation for change in what we call as a never normal world, right? It's bound to change. So how do you create that foundation basis your experience?
No, I think, very important question. I think out of entire journey of digital transformation, 50% is to adapt this change. Because if you are doing a lot of things, a lot of tools, but people are not using, then you actually drain all your efforts. And it's a multiple things which a company has to do to create this type of culture, value, and at the same time, you really have to work on the mindset of the people. Good thing is, considering today condition is a pandemic and people are forced to work from home, so people are adopting. It's like I don't see that people are not talking about technology. Even these the platform which we are talking today doing this virtual meetings is also not there last years back. We are very habitual going for a to a place somewhere in Delhi or somewhere, and in a 5-star hotel we used to discuss all these things. Now, if you really go internally, I think the best thing is that you should have a very strong case of internal communication strategy. Because if you are not involving your stakeholders day one, people will not start running or working with you. And at the same time, you have to start communicating in a manner that you are sharing the benefits. Because many people don't know how this digital things is going to bring a change. And people who are into a legacy working, and especially people who are in production quality and internal teams, they are all into all legacy systems. They don't like changes very often. They don't like digital things. They find that okay, we will not able to manage or regulator or something. So you have to communicate very strongly what is the benefits coming out of these digital tools. And at the same time, you have to be very, very efficient and effective in your training. You have to really transform things to that last level. People should know how to use technology, because if you really see today also, you give an app to a person, it doesn't mean that he understands everything. You have to go and teach them that this is how you can use them, this is how you can actually bring a lot of value to the things. And the last line, which is very important, is there should be openness to the change, which has to come from the top. And once because if you are thinking a lot of things from downside and top is not willing to really act in same manner, it is not going to work. So I think once you are done everything, I think you are almost set. And I think already, I think this has been taken, point has been said by you also. Every company has a different DNA. Every company has their own culture. uh, they have their own way of working. So nobody outsider can actually come and help you. People think that okay, find some consultant, hire some consultant, and they will change the culture. It's not going to work that way. It is you and your team who has to really work behind the scenes. You understand your company very well. and you have to find a way how this can be really adopted, and it goes in the blood. So this is, I think, we can really work on the culture piece.
No, that's very important. I think change starts internally, and then it has to percolate at all level, and then it has to have. And the external stimulus is only helpful to the extent of giving some kind of push, but that push needs to be sustained, as you rightly mentioned, Ashutosh. So with that foundation in place, I think it's also important, and we talked about whether things need to be enterprise grade or things can be point solutions, which are very, very important in solving the problems, giving new experiences. Now, if we all are, let's say, part of organizations which have a massive scale, right, in all dimensions, right? So, and the journey in the past also has been in terms of, let's say, doing solutions which solves for the immediate issues. How do you create that case for change at scale? And Sumit, here I will come to you because the case for change is very, very clear in your case as well, and for all of us, but I think most pertinent in your case situation. How do you create the success stories of digital at scale? If you also have to look forward and think about the possibilities, uh, how would you envision those?
Yeah, sure. So, Vinod, as an industry, we have struggled with certain problem statements for long. For example, if there is a certain duration of therapy for a patient to adhere to, uh, one second, sorry, see here. Yeah, we see that the compliance to medication is not completely there. Antibiotics being stopped middle of the period, and many other drugs as well. So there are these kind of problem statements which we've stayed with for some time, piloted a few experiments, but this whole pandemic gave us an opportunity to scale up some of these things, primarily because the use case was directly related to the purpose and the mission of the organization, and it's caring for life. And when we realized that our patient counselors who actually help in the respiratory therapy help patients to onboard onto an inhalation therapy, they are not physically available in clinics because clinics are down, teleconsultation is picking up, and WhatsApp teleconsulting happens. We needed a digital version of patient counseling, and that's something which we rapidly put together a team to try it out at a small scale, and found that through video consultation we were able to onboard patients to that therapy well enough, and that patient satisfaction scores, when they started going up, we realized that as we increase scale, we are able to sustain the patient satisfaction, and eventually it will reflect in sales. But I think the whole mission that you are there for caring for life, and if your medications compliance is not up to the mark, you will have a patient who is not fully treated, and he will come back to the doctor again and again from an illness mindset. So again, this was one of the ways to move away from that and try out something. Definitely it would hurt any pharma company in the short run if patients are not going back to doctors, but that's exactly what we need to do, and that's the whole mindset of bringing health and not illness in the patient ecosystem. So that's one example of what we attempted from an external lens to enable. And let me also take an example, of an internal,
Yeah.
lens. And here, our employees are also are a very, very important stakeholder and customer. And we realized that while Cipla had invested in the right data lakes, and I think Accenture was a partner for us, whether we're able to use the data lake to provide real-time insights to our customer-facing representatives, that was always a question mark. And so before COVID, we ran a certain pilot with one team, and had a very strong communication strategy there. And I think Ashutosh made that point. There's nothing like under communication here. Made the customer facing reps to see the value from this particular pilot, and we were able to actually get a lot of adoption simply because it didn't require much of their behavior change, but them to receive an insight, a tip or two of the day, which helped them to actually do a much better activities for the next 48 hours. So it was a nudge which was going on to their mobile phones, telling them that to achieve their sales plan for the month, what are the lead indicators that they are falling short on, how do they compare with their peers, and based on his personality, measuring where does this particular persona actually respond better to, and adjusting the nudges accordingly. So some of those things served us very well. This pre-COVID, but I'm saying. So those helped us a big deal when we were actually scaling them up during the COVID times. It didn't require much of a use case to sell then, but that's because the pilot was so well defined and the acceptance was so well in the pilot that we had got full sponsorship at the top. Made a big difference.
No, Sumit, that's very, very powerful as an example, I must say, because this is about enabling the people and giving them not just looking at things from a technology lens, but to make a difference in their day-to-day lives. And adoption becomes natural, as you said, in this case, because it was not and it was not forced upon them. They saw the value, and they saw it even in the pandemic times. Saw the value of this entire thing. And we always say, even as Accenture, we say that this is we call it a post-digital era, but we say that it has to be human-centered. At the end of it, human-centered design is at the core of a successful transformation, digital or otherwise, right? Because we human beings. I mean, it's about, as we have also said in multiple things, it's about human resilience. It's about human-centered change. And the examples that you highlighted also showcases how it was done in practice by actually making those changes. And I'm sure that that's a theme that all of us as practitioners can reflect upon and think of the best example. If done in the right way, it actually creates that power in the hands of people in their everyday life, as you mentioned. So I think this and we are now towards the last leg of our discussion. I think if we want to do a reflection on this in terms of the changes that and we started on a somber note, and we also saw the first wave of pandemic. We came out of it, and then again there is a second wave, and this cycle may continue. In a world where the oft repeated maxim of change being the only constant, that was never so true as it is in our lives today, all of us, right? So how do you see, if you take a view of, let's say, the midterm, in terms of how do you see things evolving differently in each of your businesses? And in no particular order, Anish, I would go with you first in terms of seeing how things will change for you, one or two salient features of what lies ahead for us, and what we should be careful of in terms of the learnings that we've gotten. That will be very helpful for the audience and all of us.
Yeah, and I confess I don't have a crystal ball, but some of the learning over the last year and a half we've brought into the business is, as you said, and everyone talks about, we don't know if there will be a new normal, and change is going to be ever present. Yeah, and I think that's one of the challenge we have. And this is where the overlap with digital becomes so much real, because digital technologies bring agility into our process. And let me give you a very simple example. In our business, we had digitized the order taking from our stores. So which means the salesman, when they go from a distributor to order to a store to say, what product should I bring you tomorrow? That was digitized on a handheld terminal by the store. Now, when we had lockdown and localized containment centers, and we, of course, had our own outer core impacted personally, and they were not well, or someone in the family was not well, what we could use is to repurpose that technology to then tell each and every salesman where to go, even in stores where they've never been before, because there's a standard beat in the normal business. And that was only possible because the underlying process was digitized. And I think my big takeaway is, in our world and times to come, we do need to digitize our processes as much as possible. Even if it doesn't create efficiency from the older or the current process, it will create as an agility play as and when the processes change. So that's the big takeaway for me, Vinod, from the last year or so.
Well, that's a very good reflection, because typically the mindset always had been to say that make what we are doing more efficient. But what we highlighted was that it's not about the enabling the past ways, making the past ways of working more efficient, but create new possibilities and new ways of working. And the example that you gave was with certainty, that what you're giving today is certain in the hands of your sales reps or salespeople on the ground, And that's why it is enabling them to execute better. But the key takeaway here, as you rightly highlighted, is that I have to change the ways of just enablement of what exists, but create new possibilities for our people, for our customers, and the society at large. Because what you said impacts me personally, because it improves my life on a daily basis, and I'm sure all of us do. So you see how good connectivity we get in this entire thing from the initiative that is undertaken at one end of the chain.
Absolutely.
No, so thanks, Anish. Thanks for that reflection. Sumit, I'll come to you in terms of your, and again, no crystal balls here, of course, but we can say best from what we learned and what we saw going forward.
Yeah, sure. In the last 1 year, I think one big learning that we are working on is the shift from creating customer touch points to creating customer journeys. We have created a lot of touch points with our customers, but we realized what we miss is actually taking the customer experience through a journey and solving a certain problem with that digitized process. So that's the kind of investments in the direction that we're taking. Secondly, a very sharp eye on prioritization, doing a few things and keeping them at a certain distance with the business, and it's a mixed bag. It has to be very close to the business. If you keep it too far, you carry the risk of not being able to take the old with the new. But if you keep it too far, you carry the risk of not actually solving a real problem on the ground, and creating a fancy solution out there. So for me, these are the three things. I mean, touch point to customer journeys, prioritization regularly, and then finding the right balance of how close to business we need to work to ensure that this is scalable.
Great. I think thank you. Thanks, Sumit, for this. Any quick reflections, Ashutosh? I think we have just we are running out of time. My apologies if we have exceeded, because this was a very engaging discussion. But if there is anything, and I will just end up with my comments towards the end. But Ashutosh, anything?
Just 10 seconds, Actually, a few years back when we used to say or release any digital thing, that time adoption was a challenge. Like people say internet is not working, I don't have a smartphone, I don't have this and all. But today things have changed. Actually, people are now asking that why you are not going digital. People are asking even vegetable guy why you are not selling digitally. So that means now the need is more than the supply. I think we have to cope it up.
Great. No, that's a very good summarization. And I think what I can say towards the end is that, there is a big ray of hope, right, that digital has created it by creating this new possibilities in our businesses, in our communities, in our lives. It is up to us to do the right things in terms of leveraging it to make a difference to things around us, and very pertinent in today's time. And if I may just say that I wanted to thank all of you for bringing out the examples from a practitioner lens, and most importantly, the authenticity with which you brought it out. It was really very heartening to see. And on that note, my own reflections are also very similar to yours. And on that note of optimism, gratefulness, and thankfulness to all of you, I would bring this discussion to a close and wish all of you stay safe, healthy, and fine, you and your extended community. Back to the organizers.
Thank you to all these speakers. It was an amazing discussion. Thank you to our moderator, Mr. Kumar, for keeping the discussion relevant, significant, and exciting. Dear audience, please take some time out and please visit our exhibitors. Thank you to our knowledge partner, Accenture, and knowledge partner, PwC, and title partner, Accenture.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.